resides in Weatherford, Texas, former Army captain in the military intelligence, Afghanistan veteran, baseball statistician turned intelligence analyst, able to take large amounts of information and data, make them digestible and understandable. Seth's inspiration regarding election integrity has made a significant impact in the nation, in the state of Hawaii, and right here in Kauai. Please welcome a doting dad of 3, a friend of Hawaii, a true patriot, and a fearless warrior, Captain Seth Keshel.
Aloha. You know, I made a point when I came to Hawaii for the first time in my life. I've now been to all 50 states. It was the first time I ever made it to Hawaii, and this is my 3rd time back in about 53 weeks. So the 1-year anniversary of my first trip just passed the beginning of this month. And it was right as you guys were coming out from under some of the worst COVID lockdown tyranny in the country. I made that point the other day on Truth Social, talking about Larry Hogan, the former governor of Maryland, who happens to be a Republican. You know, we know that term, though, the rhinos. Well, Larry Hogan talks about small government. A lot of people can talk a big game, but what do they actually do in practice? Well, big government is what he does, and that's locking people down. So we're here in the cause of a freer future, and we're not going to get there if we have filthy, corrupt elections. And it's an essential thing that everybody understand it. The point of me being here is to help you understand the national elections picture and then dial that in locally, not only statewide, but here in this county. It's a critical thing. And Hawaii has one of the most corrupt elections of the entire 2020 election, if not the most corrupt.
We're in first place.
By margin, yes, you are absolutely in first place. Now, that's the real pandemic. You guys knew that was the actual pandemic that we're suffering under, right? Yeah. It's called chronic electile dysfunction. Does anybody need a definition? No. No definitions. Okay, it's when your election doesn't work right or lasts for longer than 4 days. So we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to talk about the elections in Hawaii and on Kauai County in 2020. What we can do nationally, what we need to be pushing nationally and also locally. 10 points nationally, then the 4 for the core at the county level. And also a special feature for the first time on ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is being pushed in almost the entire American West. That is all the rage. People are trying to push ranked choice voting in.
We've got it. Next election.
Well, we're going to talk about why it's terrible. A lot of people oppose things, but they don't know why they oppose them. And a lot of people have found out the hard way, like in Alaska, that ranked choice voting is a one-way ticket to nowhere. Now, even though COVID is over, your new governor put out a mandate that said indoors, loud laughter is illegal. You're only allowed aloha. All right, without further ado, Wendy, would you please advance the slide? Samuel Adams, one of my favorite historical figures. I love him for his wit, his valor, and his candor, and quite frankly, we need a lot more Samuel Adamses out there and way fewer of these ambitious politicians that are infesting our country in every level. Sam Adams had this to say, really to people who have a comfortable life, which we have a lot of people who have a comfortable life today. So you really ought to be thankful for Pastor Monica for opening up this house tonight, because it's easy for a lot of churches to just say, yeah, we're not going to get into politics. But a lot of people still refuse to engage on any of these key issues. I consider there to be 3 major issues of our time on the Patriot right. That would be election integrity, medical freedom, and justice for political prisoners. Those 3 issues set aside patriots and true freedom fighters from just established bureaucrats that just want to make the next rank, get into the next office. Samuel Adams had this to say, for the people who don't want to mix it up. If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom. That is a very key phrase, the animating contest of freedom. This is supposed to enliven you. This is supposed to make you get up and want to fight, not to feel like a victim living underneath the tyranny. But if you love that wealth better than liberty, he says, go home from us in peace. We ask not your counsel or arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. And I posted that on social media today, that 30 years from now, the kids being born right now aren't going to remember who won all the social media fights and who had the best comebacks. They're going to wonder if anybody had their back and fought for the future that they're going to inherit. Because honestly, I think a lot of people living today feel let down that their ancestors did not uphold a free future for them. And here we are fighting for it. Slide, please. Now, my life is an election denier, according to the mainstream media. Who here is an election denier? Okay, most people here. I really prefer the term fraud affirmer. But I've been able to walk, that's me on the right, this is me. I don't know if you were able to recognize me because I don't have all the swag on in the photo here. But the lady to my right is Corrine Solomon from Audit the Vote Hawaii. And then we move on down the line. I've been able to walk along some real giants in the field of election integrity. Slide. Had some fun. There's me in the middle of a great photo bomb opportunity in Pennsylvania. Slide. And then been the subject of some really spooky articles. After all, I was a military intelligence officer, so it's really fun to put these silhouettes out there and put hit pieces out against General Flynn, Colonel Waldron, Lieutenant Colonel Raiklen, and the baby officer of that group, the captain. So we all got hit in Reuters in November of 2021. They came to an event I did in New Hampshire, and then 2 months later, I lost my day job. So you need to understand that getting deep into the weeds and ferreting out all this corruption, whether that's elections or otherwise, does come with a price. Samuel Adams already told you that. If you love wealth better than liberty, then go home from us in peace. So now's a really good time, if you're comfortable, to think about if you do want to really stand up for the things you care about the most. I lost my job for this, but God has provided for me. Slide. Fun articles that have come out. I think I've got all 12 notches in my belt now. The New York Times has come a calling, Washington Post, BBC, foreign and domestic journals, foreign and domestic enemies, as far as I'm concerned. Local press, slide. The NPR, this was an interesting one. Taking their theories on tour, National Propaganda Radio. Now this map here, this is the travels of me, Dr. Doug Frank, Professor Dave Clements, and Mike Lindell. The way I responded to this was with a 800-word email outlining all the spots that they missed in my travels. And I corrected the map to this slide. That is my travel map. Anything in red, I've just passed through, got some gas, had something to eat. Anything in green, that's more than 100 different counties that have had an election integrity event with at least myself involved in it. This has been a year and a half plus worth of love, and the only state that has eluded me thus far is North Dakota. So the best way to read that graphic here is water covers 70% of the earth and I cover the rest. Slide. Now this is when it gets fun. This was me in a state that is competing with Hawaii for most corrupt elections, Washington State. And the Seattle Times showed up. And in that article, they called me a former military captain, which is correct but not precise. And then the next paragraph mentioned that I was a ex-Navy officer. I was actually an Army captain, which is a junior officer, but a Navy officer, slide, I got promoted 3 grades. to naval captain. But I haven't seen the pay raise yet. Slide. So the experts have told you, have you heard it, that the election of 2020 was the safest and most secure election in the history of the United States. That is called gaslighting. Slide. Because President Trump won 18 of 19 bellwether counties that have perfectly aligned with every winner in every presidential election since 1980, with the exception of one. He supposedly lost Clallam County in Washington. My numbers suggest he won it by 10 points. Slide. These 4 states, bellwether states, Ohio, Iowa, Florida, North Carolina, these 4 states, when they go to the same candidate, regardless of party, it aligns with the winner in every election, 13 out of 13 times since 1896, except for in the safest and most secure election of all time in 2020. Slide. How about Trump getting 94% of the Republican Party primary vote, which is the 4th highest share of any party's primary vote in history? Slide. And then, of course, incumbent vote gain. President Trump gains 11 million votes, which is one of the highest totals of all time, and somehow became the first president since 1888 to gain votes from his previous election and not be reelected. 1888. Were any of y'all alive in 1888?
Yes, in past lives.
Some of your male voting neighbors were alive in 1888. But yeah, that's a long time. That is 71 years before Hawaiian statehood. That's a pretty large sample size. That's how I felt in front of the Arizona Senate a couple weeks ago. Well, what do you say? It was a highly emotional election. I have 70 years of data I'm showing you. Well, 70 years of information. Stick with the numbers. They tell the truth. Slide. Oh, but, the fraud is only in Philadelphia. It's only in Milwaukee. It's in Atlanta. It's definitely not in Dallas. It's not in Seattle. It's not in LA. It's not in Honolulu. Okay, let's check that out. Trust but verify. Slide. Now, Hawaii. First thing I'm going to show you here, census data. In the 2020 census, the Hawaii population is reported to be 1.45 million, which is up 94,000 from 2010. That is the slowest rate of population change in Hawaii since the 1940s. So since Hawaii became a state, your state grew by fewer people in the last decade than any point in history. I think, based on other studies I've done in Republican states, that those numbers are likely fudged high to preserve population here to make sure you don't go back to 3 electoral votes. The game has been to deprive Republican states of electoral representation to make sure that blue states are propped up. But with that said, the population in Hawaii is not surging, and I would expect that given that population drives voter registration drives voter turnout, we will probably see a pretty normalized level of turnout, not a constant flow like we have in Florida or Texas where it's hard to predict. Slide. Now, statewide. Who knew this? Did anyone know that Hawaii really likes incumbent presidents? Did anyone know that? Hawaii's first election was 1960. Just became a state the year before. And it gave its electoral votes to every incumbent president until 2004. So George W. Bush was the first president to be reelected and not carry Hawaii. But he was still within 10 points. See, the margin of victory for John Kerry in 2004 was 9.8%. Kerry won the state by only 37,000 votes. That's a pretty good run. But then what happens? In 2004, George W. Bush is reelected and then begins one of the worst second terms in the history of the United States presidency. What happened? Well, I thought this was Republican. Well, no, it's American. George W. Bush initiated 2 wars that we couldn't win. I served in one of them, and any of you serve in those wars? Any veterans in here, please stand up. We appreciate all you veterans. We had the creation of a surveillance state in your homes and in your pockets with the Patriot Act, which many people cheerfully signed because we gave away our liberties for security after 9/11. We had the collapse of traditional values under Bush. We had an economy that was out of control. We had a housing crisis and an economic crisis. And then, to top it off, there was the standard 8-year political pendulum shift away from the incumbent Republican Party, favoring the Democrat. And then who ran in 2008 for the Democrats? Barack Obama. Okay, running out of many places, including Hawaii, including Illinois. We'll leave it at that. And Obama still carried the support of the unions, which now are much weaker for Democrats. He had the soft suburban vote. He had many disaffected Republicans. He had the swing vote, and he had a record minority turnout with a record share of their vote. He had everything in his favor and an 8-year political tailwind. So we're going to see it show up in the stats. Slide. And they are tremendous moves. You can see the Republican column is completely decimated with a loss of almost 74,000 votes for McCain. With a state with a slowing population, all of the independent vote and the Democrat turnout surges over here. So Obama has a gain of 94,000. That's a tremendous gain in a small state. And you can see what it did to the margin of victory. 45.3% in favor of Obama, with this being his home state at the time of the 2008 election. But then what happens? Like Bush, Barack Obama is one of the least popular incumbent presidents in the history of the country. He lost more than 3 million votes nationally in his reelection. And had Mitt Romney not been the Republican nominee, things might have been different. Obama is one of just 3 political campaigns since 1888 to lose votes and be reelected. FDR did that trick 2 times. Slide. You can see it here, even in Hawaii. Obama is down 19,000 votes in reelection. That's just a loss of enthusiasm. But Mitt Romney is not exactly amping up turnout. So the Hawaiian population is not interested in supporting the so-called Massachusetts moderate. And by the way, a liberal, a moderate, and a conservative walk into the bar. What does the bartender say? Hi, Mitt. Now, where does it go? Despite Romney having almost no change from McCain's totals 4 years before, the loss in support for Obama results in a tighter margin slightly, by about 2.5 points favoring the Republican Party. So what this means is Hawaii began a Republican trend in 2012, albeit a very slight one. You can see here in the margins, you may not be able to see it given the size of the screen, but this is total voter registration growth in the state between elections. There was a big surge for Obama with 44,000 new registrations going into 2008, but then, of course, enthusiasm nationally was down, and that number is only 14,000 going into Obama's reelection. All right, so now we have a trend back to the Republican Party. Now we're going to move into 2016. What do we have? We have Donald Trump as the Republican nominee. Now, Trump created his own political universe in which many longtime Republicans were, or defenders of ideology like conservatism, didn't know if they had a conservative in Donald Trump. They didn't know what he was. People that didn't see any accomplishments and voted in the third party. That was more common in your Texases, your Arizonas, and your Georgias. Some states Trump had no issues at all, like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, pulling in the vote. But in Hawaii, slide. See, Trump is a little bit better off than Romney is. Trump does pretty well with the working class populations. It even starts to make inroads with minority working classes in 2016. But still, it's a small gain. This is a gain of about 7,800 votes over Romney. And what now is happening to the Democrats? Barack Obama is no longer atop the Democrat ticket, and the change is drastic. Hillary Clinton drops 40,000 votes from Obama's 2012 total, which means Clinton is nearly 60,000 votes behind Obama's total from 2008. Now we have a 10-point Republican trend from 2012, so the state's margin is 32.5 points. What that means is 2 more elections exactly like this, you're looking at a 10-point state like it was in 2004. So, if I'm Team Trump in 2020, are you guys with me so far? Do I need to back up and explain anything?
I'm with you.
Okay. If I'm Team Trump and I'm trying to forecast votes, for states. Now, I don't think Trump is trying to compete in Hawaii in 2020. You only have so much time and money and the ability to get around the country, especially in 2020 where people have shut everything down over a virus. Now, if Trump has the same gain of 8,000 votes in 2020, then he's going to come in at about 137,000 votes. I would look as a standard forecast to have Trump somewhere in the 130,000s. Slide. How about 197,000 votes? This is about 60,000 votes higher than his previous rate of growth that most people looking at Trump in 2020 would expect. He's 60,000 over in a state now that the census suggests is slowing down in its population growth. We have a trend Republican 2 elections in a row. And now that Obama is no longer on the top of the ticket, it's drastic. So what do you guys think? Do you think Joe Biden is poised to outperform Barack Obama in Hawaii? Yes or no? So this is the way I talk to people, and this is why I didn't get called to testify at the J6 stuff, because they knew I would give them about 6.5 hours of information from coast to coast confirming the medical condition of erectile dysfunction and prescribing the red pills that cure that pandemic. Now, looking here, where do you think Joe Biden's headed probably? Maybe 250 at the best case, 225? Slide. All right, so go back one, Wendy. All right, here's what I would look at. Based on them continuously losing votes, and now, by the way, I forgot to mention, this gain for Trump is 51%. He gained 51% from 2016. You're about to want to give yourselves a round of applause. 51%. That is the highest percentage Republican vote gain in the nation, and it was in Hawaii in 2020. So what I'm telling you is this number in the margin, that's going to come drastically crashing down. This is certainly with a gain that large, especially among Native Hawaiians and also the Asian vote. You're going to see this tick down. I would absolutely bet my life savings that Joe Biden is under 250,000 votes, probably 230,000 votes or less.
Not according to Scott Nago.
Well, let's say 230. Slide 230. 366 exactly. So that is only 40,000 votes higher than Barack Obama's total in 2008, with the highest Republican vote gain in the nation on the other side. Slide. Biden wins the state. Now it does tick another 3 points to the right because of the size of Trump's gains. My forecast for Biden is 218,000 votes, winning the state by only 5%. Hawaii sticks to its strong incumbent advantage, almost goes to Trump. I do have Trump carrying Honolulu County by 1 point. Slide. Of course, here's your county map. Slide. Certified results look like that. Here's what a realistic result in Hawaii looks like. Slide. Right there. Trump with over 46% in my model. And the difference between the two candidates at 21,000 votes. That, if you actually had that result certified, you would be in position to flip the state in the next election. Slide. Now, just in case people think I'm crazy and it's only in Honolulu or in Honolulu County, why don't we dig a little bit deeper? And then from here, I'm going to dig even deeper. Kauai County. This is a Democrat stronghold. Only 3 times has it been won by the Republican nominee for president, not since 1984 when Reagan won it. It's so Democrat that I've classified it as Democrat, meaning it's less than 30% Republican in 2016. Census. You're up 63,000 there since 2010. Slide. All right, 2004 in Kauai County. It's a blowout. It's a 20.8% win for Kerry. But this is the last time for a long time that Kauai County is going to be even remotely close. Because here's your Obama shift in 2008. Slide. Obama's up 6,000 votes. McCain crashes down by 3,500. So now the margin of victory for Obama is 52%. Of course, he cleaned up and won Hawaii by 45. Slide. Now you're going to see the county trend slightly back to the right. It's the same dynamic that you saw statewide for Romney-Obama. This is a Republican loss, but an even bigger Democrat loss. You can see in the margins here, very little voter registration growth, 415 new net voters from 2008, and the participation matches. How about for Trump? Slide. Now, Trump's got a pretty solid trend in the county. Trump is up 1,400 votes. And again, we have another loss of 2,000 votes Democrat, and here we get the margins moving 16 points to the right. So you see how this can stack up and start moving. And if you don't believe me, go look at some of the suburban counties in Chicago area that used to be 20 points Republican and now they're 30 points Democrat. This stuff can really get moving. So Trump in Kauai, if I'm Team Trump, a similar gain of 1,400 votes is going to put Trump right at 9,000 votes in 2020. And of course, the Democrats have now lost 2,000 votes in 2 consecutive elections. With moderate Republican growth for Trump, none for Romney. So what about Trump at 9,000? Would you guys be happy if Trump came in at 9,000 votes in 2020? Slide.
Wow.
2,500 votes over forecast for Trump in Kauai. And this is after 4,000 votes have been dropped in 2 consecutive elections. I would absolutely look for another 2,000 votes to be dumped, especially with Trump having a gain like that. My forecast for Biden in Kauai County is still generous. I've got Biden pegged for about 15,000 votes based on Trump's performance and the trend in the county. So 15,000 votes for Biden. Can we get a drum roll? 15,000 votes. Slide. Okay. So no matter the gain, we have an even larger gain here. Slide. And the margin of victory is a little bit to the right, but stays up near 30 points. I have it at a 12.5 point margin of victory, best case scenario for Biden. Slide. This is the precinct map. Kauai County gives you some of the most fascinating precinct data. And I'm going to highlight the one that is most statistically disparate, but I'm also going to show you one that's fascinating. Those of you who were here last year would have seen this. But of course, precinct 1606, Lihue. Impressive.
100%.
Obama barely won Lihue in 2012. And then Trump won it 20 votes to 10 in 2016 over Hillary. And then in 2020, Trump won Lihue 43 to 0 over Joe Biden. So Biden didn't get one single vote in Lihue, and that's how you know the dead don't vote in Lihue. But look, why is it that you have, even though it's a small sample size, you have an almost entirely all-native population in Lihue, 43 to 0, clean Trump trend, and then the rest of the precincts in Kauai pretty much move off to the left. I'll show you a really bad one. Slide. How about Kauai Middle School precinct? This is a competitive precinct. This is not a Democrat blowout precinct. You can see here in 2012, it began to become more competitive in 16. Obama wins it over Romney by almost 1,000 votes, right on the nose. And now in 2016, slide, you're going to see a big trend for Trump. Trump has a gain here of 160 plus votes. Clinton dumps over 200. So the trend in this precinct is 16 points more Republican than it was in 2012. Now, Team Trump in this precinct, if you're keeping pace with the previous gain, Trump is going to come in just shy of 1,100 votes in 2020. Slide. And there he is at 1,300 votes in 2020. So he's killing it all over the place. This is going to continue to crash down with a number like this. I would look at this total to come down around 1,300 votes to probably be a dead push in the precinct, if not a Trump win. I'd say 1,300 votes. Slide. 2,200. Now, this is 800-900 votes higher than I would anticipate based on the one input of Trump's improvements and the trend in the precinct. Now the trend moves 3 points off to the left. Slide. Certified results in the county look like this. Realistic results, please. Next. Look like that with Trump clearing 42%. That's a performance right in line with making Hawaii a very competitive state. Slide. Now, ranked choice voting. Who's familiar, deeply familiar with ranked choice voting? This is all the rage now. People are pushing for it everywhere, and they're pushing for it in some states like Georgia, in which we absolutely have to get straight if we're going to save the country at all. Georgia Behind 3 states that Trump won in 2020 that he has to win again, Texas, North Carolina, and Alaska, Georgia looms as the most important swing state in the 2024 election. If we can't get that, I don't see any way that Trump is going to take Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Arizona. Ranked choice voting. It's also called instant runoff voting. So if you see RCV or IRV, instant runoff voting, they're the same thing. The concept sounds interesting, and honestly, if you were running a vote for where do you guys want to get lunch today, I don't think you'd have a problem with ranked choice voting. When you're running a vote for who's going to run your state, your country, or your school boards or anything else, I think it's stupid, and I'm going to tell you why. Slide. This is the flow chart for ranked choice voting. What it does is it lists the candidates, and everybody can take first choice. Now, what it requires is if there are 8 people running, you have to rank 1 through 8, your preference. So you have to vote for every one of them, and you place them 1 through 8. That's the first choice round. Now, if some candidate in the first choice gets a 50% mark, he wins a majority, then the election is over. And that's just like a standard election. But if nobody makes 50%, no candidate has a majority, then the last place candidate, number 8, gets knocked off. And his votes get distributed throughout the remaining 7. And that continues on until someone makes a majority. It's very confusing, and that's one of the top 10 reasons I'm going to tell you about that people should oppose ranked choice voting. Slide. Now, not scientific, but this is why I like logic. Logic speaks to everybody. When I was in the military, officers were told to write orders at an 8th grade level of reading comprehension. Why? Because you need every single soldier in your unit, regardless of educational background or reading comprehension skills, to be able to understand the order. This is very simple. Now, in Alaska, they pushed ranked choice voting. In fact, the day Trump was elected in 2016, Alaskans supposedly said, let's do ranked choice voting. So now Alaska finally has ranked choice voting in place for 2022, and they ran a special election for the U.S. House after Don Young died last summer, and it was all mail-in. And what happened was Sarah Palin and Nick Begich, both Republicans, they ran in this special election. And then Mary Peltola, the Democrat, also ran, and then we had various candidates that were eligible for a write-in spot. In the first choice round, the 2 Republicans, one of them had 31, the other had 28, and the Democrat had less than 40. Slide. The 2 Republicans combined for almost 59% of the vote in the first choice, meaning the electorate that showed up was 60%, nearly 60% Republican, with an advantage over the Democrat by 19 points. How did this election turn out? Slide. Ta-da. Thanks to ranked choice voting. The write-in candidates get eliminated. Their votes are redistributed. Then the soft Republican Begich gets eliminated, and his votes are redistributed, and she gets the majority at 51.5%. This was replicated in the midterm election a few months later. She had to defend her seat 3 months after she won it in a special election, and the same result happened. That's ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting was specifically put in place in Alaska to get Lisa Murkowski elected to the Senate, re-elected to the Senate, instead of Trump's choice, Kelly Tshibaka. So ranked choice voting typically only benefits the House, not the grassroots. Slide. 10 points against ranked choice voting / IRV, instant runoff voting. The first reason to be against it is that it consolidates 2-party power. People that are pushing ranked choice voting like they did in Alaska, they say that this is how you're finally going to get these independent candidates elected into office. Well, that's not how it happens, because normally you're going to have several of them on the ticket, and they're going to split up votes, and gradually they're going to eliminate one another, and all the votes are going to trickle back in to the Republican or Democrat apparatuses. Point number 2, you can't vote against a candidate. So if you've got Joseph Stalin versus Donald Trump, you're going to have to rank Stalin in there somewhere. So there's no way to just not vote for or vote against a candidate, because if you don't vote, your ballot becomes exhausted. That's going to be another point. Number 3, the voting always turns out to be strategic, no matter what they say that you're going to finally vote for people, because you're still going to be positioning people just in case your scenarios don't work out right that you don't want winning. Number 4, the extreme candidates managed to get in, just like I showed you there in Alaska. Number 5, moderate candidates are going to get squeezed out, just for the same reason the extreme candidates get in. Because the grassroots show up for both sides, and then they push their crazy buttons and they rank their folks number 1, and then the number 2 candidates split the vote in the subsequent rounds. Number 6, ballot exhaustion. If you don't vote for all 8 candidates and the election continues to run, your ballot eventually gets tossed out. That's why in what they call the maximum round, where the election is decided, there are fewer ballots tabulated than in the first choice round. Number 7, low participation. Some of the municipalities in the country, like St. Paul, Minnesota, like San Francisco, since they rolled out ranked choice voting in the past decade, their turnout rates have continued to plunge. People are less interested in voting in elections like this because, number 8, it's confusing to voters. People have run tons of tests about this, and even people that are wonderkinds have a difficult time understanding how to explain ranked choice voting to people other than the votes are redistributed as candidates spell out of the race. Number 9, more chances for fraud. As these ballots continue to be tabulated and we go round and round and round, chain of custody becomes a problem, transporting ballots, leading to delays in counting votes. So the change to ranked choice voting creates more meticulous issues that have to be navigated, including handling and storage of ballots and reporting votes and counting votes for weeks on end. Look at Alaska's ranked choice voting election in November of 2022. Lisa Murkowski wasn't called the winner until the last week of November. And this is a state that has 1/30th the amount of votes as Florida, who reports their votes by midnight on election night. 1/30th. So ranked choice voting, it may be new to some people, but it's the same old game of making sure that people have all the options to make sure their folks get into office. Slide. The road ahead starts with local involvement. And Hawaii has some great warriors here. And there's been a lot of good work done with very little support from political allies. So Ralph and Laura have done an excellent job here. You guys ought to give them a hand. So Ralph has done some great lawfare and had some victories. Now, of course, we have to continue pushing to get the full impact of victories, not just here, but everywhere else. You can see in Arizona that everybody sees what's happening in these courtrooms, but nobody has the guts to be the first judge to toss a corrupt election. There's been great lawfare done here that has improved visibility in elections. Felicia was telling me about some of this here in Kauai, and it's good that we have our officials talking about local action. Ralph was telling me about the drop boxes. You guys have unsupervised drop boxes 100 yards from post offices. And he said that he was given a list of the drop boxes and the statistics linked to them, and they show a 10% disparity. That's some pretty good groundwork. Now, what are we going to do all across the islands here to make sure that that impact is felt elsewhere? That's when you're going to find yourself getting places because of what you're doing here. So, Ralph, good on you and great work. Everybody give him a round.
Honorary JP.
All right. Point number 1 for the 10 steps to true election integrity. These are starting to finally take root after more than a year of talking in them. Nebraska has several of these forward in bills, and also in Arkansas. So they're starting to take root. And in Arizona, we're going to be very close in a couple weeks to Arizona potentially banning the use of machines in their elections. And that's why I told people to look up the plenary power of the Arizona legislature on True Social the other day, because they're going to be very close and there's going to be a huge fight about it. Slide. The first point to true election integrity is to clean out the voter rolls. The voter rolls are absolutely filthy. You can see it on the numbers I showed for Hawaii and Kauai County. The explosion in voter registration between 2016 and 2020. Some states have special tricks to drive up voter registration. Oregon with their motor voter bill being an excellent example. But a bloated voter roll combined with a state with mail-in elections. You can literally, with the use of sophisticated technology, match up a mail ballot request to a registration that is known to be duplicated or tripled or not real to begin with, and ensure that those ballots are harvested and dropped in drop boxes and therefore counted. The voter rolls are the foundation of a clean election or a fraudulent election. Slide. Wisconsin gives us some amazing data. The Democrats in Wisconsin have to max out 2 counties to win their state. That would be Milwaukee County and then Dane County, which is home to Madison and the massive, sprawling cesspool known as the University of Wisconsin. If you want to come up here and take photos, you can. These apartments are extremely special. This one up here in the top left, this has 312 registered voters in 20 units, which is an average of 16 registered voters per unit. Now, maybe they have big families up there in Wisconsin, but that's pretty big. Now, the one on the bottom left is more special. This one is 341 registered voters at 15 units, an average of 23 registered voters per unit in a state that relied heavily on mail-in ballots and ballot harvesters with unsupervised drop boxes, with mules operating in the dark of night behind their masks, in a state decided by 20,600 votes at 3:45 in the morning. We have a 2-to-1 ratio in some of the nursing homes here, register voters to beds. And in Racine County, Sheriff Schmaling was one of the only sheriffs in America to actually take the election fraud issue seriously and made charges and referred them to the local authorities. And it's became a major issue with the Wisconsin Elections Commission. So the voter rolls. The canvassing is essential for identifying where these fraudulent voters are hanging out, whether they're hanging out in open, empty fields or registered 35-to-1 apartment, or they've gone on to the afterlife 60 years ago, but they still hang around to vote. Slide. Point number 2 is to ban all electronic elections equipment. So if the solution is to ban the equipment and get back to pen and paper at the precinct, they go in the opposite direction. In large counties, like in Maricopa County, they push to these voting centers, or they just collapse the precincts and push them into a voting center, so now there's no transparency where somebody like me can look at one precinct and show you the growth in one single election and prove to you that it's not real. But banning the machines, why? Well, I'm not a software expert, but it's a black box voting system with no transparency. You put your votes in there, you hope that it reflects what you want, and then they take them out on a thumb drive and walk them over to a central tabulation facility. Your vote goes on a thumb drive to a tabulation facility. We have some examples in Texas where a thumb drive is inserted into a system and it shows 38 votes, and then you pull it out and it shows 1 vote. Not good. Now, this is why there's no replacement for old school pen and paper. Slide. When I talk about electronic elections equipment, ballot marking devices, scanners, tabulators, electronic poll books. The poll books are very important. This stuff has to go away, and it has to be replaced with hand-counted, hand-marked paper ballots at the voting center or at the precinct. I mentioned that Arizona may be very close to doing this here in the next couple weeks. It's going to be a huge fight if they manage to run that resolution through. It's going to be binding without the governor as well. Slide. Number 3, voter ID with paper ballots only. Now, how many of you guys have flown here recently? Flown out, flown back? Hey, I flew in yesterday. I had to show them an ID. How about when you were 20 or 21 or maybe even 18 and you bought your first drink, you got carded, you had an ID. You've been pulled over by a state trooper, you show them an ID. How about bought a firearm? Does anybody here have firearms? Okay, I used to own firearms, but I lost them all recently in a tragic boating accident. And unfortunately, all my ammunition and magazines were with me too. Now, one day I'll get them all back. But look, we need identification for everything. People have succeeded in turning this into a suppression issue or a race-based issue, as if, and these same people definitely won't go into the minority areas and ask people if they actually have an ID, because they probably want to keep all their teeth. People have IDs, and if for some reason they don't, I do not object to issuing them state IDs for voting. But we can't continue to have elections in which we justify no identification. But we have to have ID for everything else. Anybody that wants to withhold voter ID from an election intends to defraud an election. And that's exactly how people got around it in Wisconsin with the mail-in voting, with the indefinitely confined voter rolls. Slide. Slide. Number 4, ban mail-in voting. Why? Because it's the most wide open system for fraud that has ever been devised for use in elections. Jimmy Carter and James Baker determined this at a bipartisan panel in 2008. Jimmy Carter, yes, the Jimmy Carter that is the only person happy that Joe Biden is in the White House today. When I have that asterisk there, why is there an asterisk? It's because it means to severely restrict. Now clearly overseas military will be voting absentee. The legitimately disabled, with a notary, we can find a system that works for them to vote absentee. I can't think of a better state than this one to stand in line to wait to vote twice every other year in a primary and a general election. Our elections are not about convenience. They are about accuracy. They are about protecting the vote. It is not designed to make sure that people can just throw a ballot in a drop box once every 2 years. Slide. You never know where these mail-in ballots are going to wind up anyway. Now slide. Number 5, ban early voting. I am under the impression that our Constitution lays out the time and place of federal elections, and now we call it election day, not election weeks, not election month. So in Washington and Virginia and in Minnesota, they begin voting for president in September, which means 1.5 years from now, we will be in the middle of a presidential election. Now, what better way to have a run-up to understand how well your opponent is doing than to have a lengthy early voting period? Slide. This was Texas in 2020. Because of the COVID pandemic, Governor Abbott decided to move Texas's early voting from 2 full weeks to 3. As if 2 weeks isn't enough to get people to come vote, including weekend voting. Now this is Houston, Harris County, one of the largest counties in the country. And the Democrats responded by organizing drive-through voting lanes. Because it's too dangerous to get out of your car and vote during early voting, you can pull up, crack the window, and hand me 8 IDs, and I'll give you 8 ballots. And when you're done, you can pass them in. And the result was something like it happened here in Hawaii with a massive Republican performance and a Republican stronghold, but the tightest margin of victory in 25 years. Texas. Slide. Number 6, drastically smaller precincts. This goes hand in hand with what we were just talking about, getting away from those voting centers that are happening in the major urban areas. This is going to be extremely critical if we are ever going to streamline elections to be one day and one vote. Because if we continue to have the bloated precincts, we won't be able to do it. Slide. This is Maricopa County in 2020. Maricopa County has more than 700 voting precincts in the 2020 election. And a number of these precincts have more than 10,000 registered voters. 7,000 plus ballots cast in the 2020 election in precincts of that size. Now, anyone who's run precinct level elections should be able to tell you there's no way to oversee or quality control the voter roll in a precinct that large, to make sure that it stays updated, to make sure that people that have died or moved away are not on the rolls, to preside over several weeks of elections activities with a roll that size, and then at the end of it to QA/QC and reconcile the tallies to make sure they're right before they get certified. So if we're going to have clean elections, then we're going to have to get involved at the precinct level, fill all those chairman assignments, which is important as well. But we have to get down to 1,200 registered voters or less at the precincts to be able to crank people through there in one day, one vote on paper ballots, hand count. Slide. Point number 7, ban ballot harvesting. The only state that's really cracked the whip on this issue is Florida. Florida has it banned. I mean, Texas has it banned too, but what good is it banned if it's not enforced? Florida has made ballot harvesting a felony. And of course, Governor DeSantis got reelected with 19+% margin. And he created an election crimes task force. Now, ballot harvesting is the secret sauce for amping up mail voting turnout, especially when you have candidates who don't bother to campaign or they campaign from a basement in Delaware. Banning ballot harvesting is critical for crippling the mail-in voting fraud operation. And also, I would put banning the unsupervised drop boxes under the same category here. Slide. Number 8, Election Day is a holiday. Not a conservative solution, not a liberal solution, but one that I think most Americans will support far left, far right, right, left, center left, middle. The only people that won't support it are going to be bureaucrats who understand that it's only going to be an option if we strike back on the mail-in voting and the early voting and we get back to the fundamentals of elections. Otherwise, this is useless. This is a critical thing, and I would consider that to be a very good barometer that we're on the right path nationally to fixing the elections problem. Slide. Number 9, new reporting requirements for transparency. Sounds boring, but what does it look like if you're in Arizona and these small counties? Maricopa County and Pima County make up 77% of the vote in Arizona. So you have 13 counties that combine to make 23% of the vote that get their votes disenfranchised because Maricopa County and Pima County need to count votes for more than a week because they have the totals coming in from the small counties and they know how many they need to get over. Imagine an election in Pennsylvania in which 66 counties wait for Philadelphia to report its vote and then wait a week and come in 2% higher. How long do you think that would last in the mainstream media? Not long. We need to get away from the North Carolina rules where you're counting ballots for 9 days after the election, or the Alaska rules where you can request a mail-in ballot at 5 p.m. the day before the election and have a week to turn it in. We have to get away from the Raffensperger rules in Georgia, this guy right here. DeKalb County counted votes until Joe Biden won the state, and then there were no more votes to be counted. Standards for all counties across the board, and this has to be ironclad if we're going to believe in elections again. Slide. And the last point, heavy prison sentences for all who commit fraud. Unfortunately, my PowerPoint application always autocorrects firing squads to prison sentences. But this has to be a federal statute of sorts because there's a difference. Do you guys know the difference?
Stuff, it's 2 years, even if you can get a conviction. 2.
Do you know the difference between voter fraud and election fraud?
For election fraud.
Voter fraud is when you vote twice. Election fraud is when there's a wide conspiracy to defraud the entire vote and to put in systems that manipulate the entire outcome of elections. So that has to be dealt with very harshly, or this is going to be the new norm. We ran cleaner elections in Afghanistan, and that is a doggone shame. Slide. So here's your 10 points. If you want to come up, grab a photo of that. There they all are in a nice, tidy order. If we get these 10 points in place, we're going to be good to go. But it's a long road here. So for anybody who thought that we were going to overturn elections in 2 years, take a look at the states and where they stand on these, and really you'll find almost everything in major disarray. In everything, whether they're major issues or even what seem like very fundamental ones. I'll give you all a couple minutes here, a couple seconds. All right, slide. 4 for the core. I came up with an idea about 3 months ago called 4 for the core. You can go on the website 4forthecore.com. A very talented patriot used her software company to develop that website free of charge. So there are a lot of people. You guys understand that we need to not only fix elections, but we need to get back to the basics and everything. The left, the reason they're so powerful is because they spend their money on themselves. And they also funnel you to their businesses. And then they fund all their operations with dark money. And what you have is a bunch of full-time people going after your rights and freedoms, and we're sitting here playing into their system. Now, of course, I'm fortunate that I had a friend that was willing to do this, but spending your money with patriots is an important thing to do as well. 4forthecore.com. Those 4 points up there come off of the 10. Point number 1, voter registration goes with the first of 10 points to true election integrity. That's your canvassing operations. That is asking your county, when we find fraudulent registrations, are you willing to pull them off the rolls or refer them to be eliminated from the rolls? For those who think it can't happen, Los Angeles County, California was just forced by lawfare to remove 1.2 million fraudulent registrations from their rolls last week. So it's a long slog to get anything like that done. But we have lawyers too. We have to have the evidence. So the canvassing is going to find these fraudulent registrations that are being linked up with mail-in ballots. Pillar number 2, primitivity. That links up with the second of the 10 points. which is to lobby the county to get away from the use of machines. Now, you may have certain state laws, depending on what state you're in. Like Georgia is a good example. They're just going to refer you back to the state, and it's going to go nowhere, but getting away from machines. Point number 3 for the core matches up with the 7th of 10, which is security. Ralph has been all over this. Are we willing to get rid of these unsupervised drop boxes? We don't even need them. If you're going to have a mail-in election, we have the post office right there. So the drop boxes, of course, are just sitting there waiting to be hit by ballot harvesters. And then point number 4, and 4 for the core, is about transparency. That's a state level issue, mostly trying to see if we can rearrange states to have their voting and reporting systems favoring smaller counties or protecting smaller counties, which protecting the rights of the minority is one of the key concepts in American liberty. Slide. So, concluding remarks. Why are we here ultimately? You're still here. So that's a pretty good sign that you care. Not here just in the theater or in the church, but you're still in Hawaii. There's a lot of people that are in states, especially Washington or New Jersey or California, Illinois, that throw their hands up and run off and leave. And they think that by going to a so-called red state that they're going to be free of these issues that plague blue states, which these blue states were once red states. And they were systematically taken over. The left does that. They systematically take out Colorado. Since 2004, I put together an electoral college map for 2024 as a simulation. Colorado's gone. New Mexico is gone. Virginia is gone. Nevada is pretty much gone. And all those states were Bush states in 2004. If Trump had those in his back pocket for 2024, there's another 34 electoral college votes on the board. You need one vote and you're going to win the presidency. Systematically, they pick off the states. The people respond by leaving the states and going somewhere else, and they get followed. They go to Arizona. Well, look at Arizona today. Arizona was one of the most historically Republican states in modern political history. So why do I say that? I say that to tell you that anybody can leave and run away from a problem. That's most of the people in the world. Remember, read in the Gospels, in Matthew, I believe it's Matthew 7, it says, wide is the gate and broad is the path that leads to destruction, and many travel it. But small is the gate, and narrow is the way that leads to life, and few find it. So likewise, I believe that the few are going to be the ones that save the country, not the masses that run away from every problem. So it's up to you to determine if you want to take good enough and live good enough, or if you're old enough and you think you can ride it out into the sunset, maybe you can. There are certain states where some people are going to be able to ride it out into the sunset, and then there's others where they won't. But we're reaching a time where the country is going to sink or swim. We don't have a whole lot of time left. Look at the electoral map for 2024. Look how little margin of error there is. And that's just one solution. We've put Trump in office before and still had to deal with all these other people that stopped any progress that his administration tried to make. So it's a lot bigger. The fight for the country does not end with a Trump win in 2024. Passivity, complacency are the enemies of liberty and freedom. Those are going to do us in. So it's up to you guys to figure out if you're willing to bear the cost of what it takes to actually fix things. You know, so Laura and Ralph certainly are known commodities here in Kauai. They're people that are behind liberty efforts, and they've got their names on lawsuits out there challenging this government. So when you decide to stand up and get involved in things, you're doing it to tear down the corruption around you. And when you do that, the corruption bites back. So the newspapers will become familiar with you. I kind of consider it an honor that some of the Hawaii news journals start throwing fire at me before I even land here. I feel like Godzilla coming on this island. So you have to figure out now what you're still comfortable if you're willing to lose things that you like, things that make you comfortable for the cause of liberty. And if you don't, I always ask people, if not you, then who? Because there's not a whole lot of people coming behind you to save the day. So it's an important thing to understand now, before you get involved in anything, if you're willing to stand up underneath all that pressure and still do the right thing. I didn't think I was. In 2020, I was just some guy with a hobby that happened to predict all 50 states right in the 2016 election. And then that election happened. And on November the 4th, I got up. I was sleepless the night before. I'd gotten up, gone to the bathroom, and I realized they were calling Wisconsin and Michigan for Biden in the middle of the night. And I recognized what was happening across the country on November the 4th, and I was sick. I was depressed. I went to bed at about 5 o'clock that night. And I got up on the morning of November the 5th, and I felt like a new person. And I realized that I'd been put where I was, given the skills that I have for a reason. And every day when I feel like slowing things down and trying to go back to some sense of normalcy, which I no longer have, I do not regret standing up for the country. And that's what my dad taught me. So I personally think that if I were in a state that was mired in corruption, I could probably be in no better place to fight back, because this is what it's all about. You guys are in the right place at the right time. So instead of considering yourselves underneath a thumb of tyranny, thank God for the opportunity that you have to be a bright light.
Amen.
Slide. If you want to keep up with me, I prefer to use Truth Social a lot more these days than Telegram, although I still have Telegram under @RealSKeshel. Substack. I enjoy writing on my Substack, skeshel.substack.com, and if you want to pile on in 4 for the Core, 4forthecore.com. And I want to thank you, Laura and Ralph, and Pastor Monica, for opening up this house and organizing this event. This is a very important time in our nation's history that we're going to look back at if we all get involved, and we're going to be very happy that we did, and it's going to be a great future for everyone. So thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Thank you.